A military lease clause addendum is a section of a rental agreement that explains specific protections given to tenants who are members of the U.S. Armed Forces. The clauses exist because the possibility of a deployment means members of the military are more likely to have to move suddenly, so suddenly that they might have to break their lease, than the general population. Without these protections, tenants who are members of the military could face fines or fees for ending a lease early. We're eForms, the world's biggest database of legal documents. Make sure that you watch to the end of this video for a link to a sample military lease clause addendum that can be filled out, signed, and incorporated into any lease. Now, let's begin. First, let's look at why is this clause necessary. Along with setting out the monthly rent, many leases require that tenants commit to paying rent for a certain amount of time. In some states, for example, a standard lease agreement is based around a term of at least a year. The lease will also specify what happens if a tenant tries to leave early. Possible consequences include the tenant pays a fine, the tenant must pay rent until a replacement tenant is found, the tenant is on the hook for the whole year's rent, no matter when the lease is broken. Landlords want these terms because the process of finding the right tenant can be time-consuming, and these clauses discourage tenants from leaving and creating an empty unit. But this need for stability clashes with the interests of the military, whose employees may be stationed in one place only to be needed elsewhere long before a lease has expired. How do military lease clause addendums solve this problem? Military lease clauses generally contain language that limits the amount of notice a tenant must provide for breaking a lease early, or eliminate the penalty associated with doing so. These clauses typically apply only to members of the military, and only come into effect if the tenant is breaking the lease because of a call to service. Most clauses will allow the tenant to terminate a lease with 30 days written notice, no matter how much notice is typically required or when the lease is scheduled to terminate. It seems clear why tenants who are service members might want to include a military lease clause. Should landlords want to include them? Absolutely. As a landlord, there are few things that will tarnish your name, like trying to chisel a member of the military. Making these provisions standard will enhance your reputation. And although landlords and tenants have considerable freedom to negotiate the provisions of a lease agreement, the landlord-tenant laws in most states contain protections for military service members. This means that even if a landlord creates a lease agreement without a military lease clause addendum and the tenant signs it, that tenant may still be protected against fines and fees if they're called to serve. There's also the Service Members Civil Relief Act, a federal law that applies throughout the country and contains numerous protections for qualifying service members. Under the Act, the Justice Department can sue landlords and levy big fines for attempting to stop service members from breaking a lease. If you're a qualifying service member and are having problems with your landlord, speak to an officer or someone at the local base about legal assistance. We're eForms, the internet's largest database of legal documents. To see a sample military clause addendum that can be added to any lease, simply click on the link below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more daily videos.